let's explore the difference between affirmation and meditation. This evening's lesson is drawn from a good-hearted question found on Reddit from a person for whom English was their second language, and so I really feel that we should give this individual the benefit of doubt and really cut this person some slack. They began, hearing affirmations like "I am" type of a thing. Is it meditation? Which is a legitimate question. And they continue. Right now, I don't want to meditate with only myself and thoughts. Let's stick a pin in that. So I want to do it with I am affirmations, like a guided meditation. But I don't know that this itself could be considered meditation. Is it the same thing or not? Now, this is a great question I wish I would have asked 30 some odd years ago. So clearly this person is much more intelligent than myself. But of course, that is pretty low-hanging fruit. Good evening, Kevin Hayes and company and associates. So let us begin with broad brushstrokes. And we will begin like I often do with the yin and yang of it all. Approximately 100 years before the advent of the Buddha, Lao Tzu is said to have composed the 81 poems of the Tao Te Ching. The book is very concise. You can blast through it in about a week, which means you could read it 52 times a year. If you did, you would notice patterns. Not only would you notice there's a profound difference between yin and yang, but you would notice that the author implores the reader to always choose yin. Let's take a deeper look at that. When we talk about yang or patriarchy, a Buddhist version of that would be the attributes of the Buddha's wicked cousin, Devadatta, who thought being rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel was a jolly good thing. Specifically, let's narrow it down to being rigid and controlling. So when we are practicing affirmations and many other forms of manifesting, we're being rigid and controlling. How are we being rigid? I want this and nothing else. Nothing else is acceptable. I want this. And controlling. I'm going to make it happen through magical thinking, visualization, and the words coming out of my gaping maw. Fabulous. But what about yin? Well, yin's about matriarchy and is wonderfully exemplified by Gautama, who was known as the Buddha, who thought being flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind was Jim Dandy. Specifically, he'd rather be flexible than rigid, and he'd rather be laid back than controlling. I'll tell you, I've known controlling people. Sometimes they get their way, but have you ever met a controlling person who was peaceful, who was resilient, who felt fulfilled in the long term? I haven't. So where affirmations are about reaching and controlling, meditation is about accepting and releasing. Consider this phrase, if you will. Let me know if you've heard this and perhaps where you've heard it or read it. Whatever comes, I let it come. Whatever stays, let it stay. Whatever goes, I let it go. That is not an affirmation. It's a description, a poetic description of an attitude. We cannot use an affirmation to change the way we think and feel and dance with reality. An affirmation is a lie we tell ourselves with great hope. A meditation is about vulnerability and release. It takes great courage and precise instruction, and sadly, Sturgeon's Law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks, but not in the fun, tingly way. So we've discussed reaching versus releasing. Now let's explore what the author of the question which was that the author of the questions predicament. What to do with all these thoughts? And for that, we shall gaze upon the prospect of mindfulness and meditation, the seventh and eighth folds of the Buddha's Eightfold Path, through the lens of neuroscience. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, first off, right off the bat, mindfulness is not concentration. Different parts of the brain. Concentration, active concentration, and active contemplation rely upon various parts of the front of the brain known as both the medial and the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which, as far as I'm concerned, are winning answers in Scrabble. The problem with relying upon this hunk of meat is that it causes our blood to collect at our amygdala, the seat of anxiety and aggression in the dungeon of our limbic system, way down below. But there's good news. When we swap out active concentration for active mindfulness, and when we replace active contemplation, active analysis for passive meditation, our blood shifts to this thing that looks like a catcher's mitt, this thing that the big kids describe as the anterior cingulate gyrus, this thing that functions as the hub of our mirror neurons, the seat of empathy and compassion and love. I don't know about you, but I'd rather be defined by this hunk of meat than this hunk of meat. Well, that's cool. Now that we know that we're using a different... By the way, I skipped a part. So if active concentration and active contemplation are focusing on that hunk of meat right behind our forehead right here, well, then passive mindfulness and passive meditation are focused more on a different part of our central nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. So let's go into a little bit more detail to really wade deeper, wade in up to our knees to really understand about all these thoughts we have to endure when we meditate. Whether you know it or not, whether you feel it or not, every time you inhale, and I inhale, and everybody inhales, we are accessing our sympathetic nervous system. What is that? Well, it's located in the thoracic or ribcage region of our spinal cord. And what has it evolved to do? To notice things, but to notice things passively, vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly, which infers a relinquishment of control. You and I are not the producer or the director or the playwright or the thespian. We're just someone in the audience enjoying the show upon the stage. And what a show it is. This sympathetic nervous system could notice sights, sounds, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like. It could notice emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. But that's not all. It can notice a whole spectrum of things, from the external to the internal, from the physical to the mental, from the pleasurable to the painful, from the interesting to the boring, from the glorious to the grotesque. And now we want to know, what are we to do with all those things? The sheer volume of those things is overwhelming, no less the intensity. What are we to do with those things? Fortunately, every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, whether we intend to or not, whether we mean to or not, we are accessing our parasympathetic nervous system, ensconced within the lower lumbar region of our spinal cord, as well as the tippy top of the cervical region that some of the cool kids refer to as the brainstem. This parasympathetic nervous system is wired to support both physical relaxation as well as a mental release. Every time we inhale, we involuntarily perceive. Every time we exhale, we involuntarily release. This is not concentration. This is not analysis. This is passive and easy and so efficient. The Buddha said you could master the path of enlightenment in as little as 7 years, or 7 quarters, or 7 months, or 7 fortnights, or 7 weeks, or even 7 days. Does that mean that every time we exhale, whatever thoughts that were troubling us pop like balloons under the tender mercies of a kitten's claws? No. It just means we're going through different modes. You might have a very good exhalation, but that will not be your last exhalation unless something goes horribly wrong. All our lives we breathe in and breathe out. All our lives we drink water and urinate. All our lives we eat food and defecate. All our lives we get up and go about our business. And all our lives every evening we go to sleep. There's not one full moon. There's not one season. Just as nature is cyclical. Every season following another. Every phase of the moon following another. Every sunrise following its sunset. So with our mind. There are things we notice. There are things we release. The quest is not to be controlling. The quest is not to make things, just so. The job is to cooperate with the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems in a way that maximizes our peace and our love and our joy and our resiliency. Each of us has a brain, and that brain is an idiot savant. It's a lot like Urkel. Did I do that? Our brain is not malicious, not trying to harm us. It's just like a bull in a china shop. Or like a cat when it somehow got hung up on a shopping bag and is running around the house and it thinks it's being chased by the bag when in all actuality it's the one dragging the bag. That's what our brain does. But there's a simple solution. Just like Urkel was intelligent and sweethearted, and if you gave him a task, he would do it with the utmost of enthusiasm. Similarly, if we ask our brain to silently and mentally recite the demonstrative pronoun this during each inhalation, it will inadvertently cooperate with our sympathetic nervous system and will thus practice mindfulness. Similarly, if during each exhalation we invite our brain to silently and mentally recite the one-syllable verb ease during each exhalation, our brain will cooperate with our parasympathetic nervous system and will experience momentary meditation. And so we can master the Buddha's path of meditation through something as ironically easy as 2 monosyllabic words. I do look forward to practicing with you after approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I've spent about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each sect of Buddhism so that you would not have to. Welcome, my friends, to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. Now, I want to be a good host and recognize that someone wrote something, so let's see what was written. There we go. Kevin wrote, "That is hilarious. My cat got caught in a bag and scared the milk duds out of me." I think that's the most hysterical thing. One time I had a orange cat named Simba. This is many, many years ago when I was married. And my wife had long hair, which she would constantly be shedding around the apartment. And the cats would invariably eat her hair. And so when the poor cat would go to defecate, it would poop out the poop, but the poop would still have the hair in it, whose other end was still connected to his intestines. So one time, our orange cat was being chased by a poop connected to his intestines by my wife's hair, which he thought was horrifying, but I thought was hysterical. It created a housekeeping dilemma, but it was funny. Yes, I'm a bad vegan. Okay, so let's tap button 9. Let's play with the latest iteration of easy meditation. Iteration is a verb I learned from good old Elon Musk. We're just going to play with 4 exercises in a circuit, and eventually we're going to seal everything with a closing chant. Just as a runner will warm up before a sprint, likewise we can play with a gentle, passive a set of 4 gentle passive contemplations to likewise warm up before we get to the business of noticing and releasing. So let's bring the 4 bases of mindfulness into the figurative practice of the rainbow body. Please chant with me. Oopsie. Rather than indulge or controlling tendencies with our follies of active visualization, emotion, magic, and belief, we could just recite these wise words in harmony with our breathing and allow our subconscious to do the heavy lifting. Let us sidestep the rigidity that confuses metaphors for literal statements. I think poetically it would be better if I reversed the sequence of these 2 words. So let's hit cut and paste. And throw in an accent for good measure. Let us accept the rigidity that confuses metaphors or statements literal, and relax into the flexibility that savors the chance explaining metaphors as similes. And now we can dig in. All appearing circumstances or lots could be as impermanent and interdependent. How about visible? All visible circumstances or lots could be as impermanent and interdependent, as if they could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into this body or form. Please notice how we are using melting as a metaphor of impermanence and absorption as a metaphor of interdependence. I was a kid. My maternal grandmother would make homemade waffles. Whenever she'd visit from upstate, she'd bring great big bags of the waffles with her, as if her grandchildren only loved her for those waffles. And my favorite thing was to eat those waffles as breakfast, toasty, warm, piping hot, and we could squeeze the margarine on top of it and let it melt into it. That was a mouth-watering example of interdependence, if you ask me. So we're going to take all these words and reduce them to just 6 syllables. As we breathe in, we can silently and mentally recite, seen, lots, melt. And as we relax, during our exhalation, we could silently and mentally recite, into form. So let's play with this right now. And let's do this for 4 rounds, pretending that each round is simply 1 inhalation, followed by 1 exhalation. Excuse me. And I think it can be great fun to count 4 repetitions of this on our left hand. We can advance our left thumb during each inhalation, allowing it to come to rest upon the sets of creases and then tip of our left little finger. Together. Remember, our job is not to actively concentrate or actively visualize or actively believe or actively emote. We're simply playing with words silently and mentally and passively in harmony with our breathing. And doing so helps us to loosen up before the big sprint. Mr. J has chimed in. Let's see here. Jay's House of J, and he wrote, so I guess whatever flows, let it flow, pertaining to the cat back-end hairball. Aptly put, Mr. J. Now, if I was really funny, I'd be able to say that in the voice of Harley Quinn, but I'm not there yet. Let's see. Here we go. All sensual bodies or forms could be as impermanent and interdependent as if they could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into this communicational speech. That's so weird. I guess delightfully doesn't fit over there? Oh, it doesn't. Okay. So let's count now upon our left ring finger. All resounding interpersonal speech could be as impermanent and interdependent as if it could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into this mind. So let's count upon our left middle finger. And I spy with my little eye a comment. Let's see here. There we go. I'm curious your opinion. Oh, right. Oh, right. That is an excellent question, and I would like to. Well, I might as well answer it right now. Patriarchy manipulates the masses through fear. And one of the ways, and so patriarchy has always teamed up with fundamentalist religion because they're so good at scaring people. That's why on the chessboard, in addition to knights, there are bishops. Therefore, it should come as a little surprise, the majority that a large part of the spiritual life of anybody stuck in fundamentalism is ensuring an auspicious rebirth. The Buddha spoke very little about that, other than saying that the most efficient way to take an auspicious rebirth was to practice loving kindness. And in the Dhammapada, we read that a life of meditation and kindness creates no regrets in this life or the next. Was that literal? Was that metaphoric? Tough to tell. But it was kept super simple. Basically, the thrust of the Buddha is practice the Eightfold Path and everything will take care of itself. You don't need faith. You don't need fear. Regardless of the malarkey that has been taught in his name for a very long time. Having said that, there are many, many people who devote their lives not to the Eightfold Path, but just to taking an auspicious rebirth. And so they practice concentration, not mindfulness, but concentration upon the recitation of the Buddha of limitless light, known in Sanskrit as Amitabha, and in various dialects as Amitofu or Amida. Why, in the fourth Lethal Weapon movie, the American audiences were first introduced to Jet Li as a badass assassin who could kill people with one hand while chanting Namu Amitofu on beads in his other hand. And at the very end, he'd finish them off by garroting them with a mechanism hidden in his mala because he's such a badass. This is all the way back in the 90s when the crust of the earth was still cooling. So there are people who were taught their whole lives to practice Namu Amitofu. And that's fine. Some people throughout the ages have tried to blend a form of Zen with Buddha name recitation. So they blended it with the form of Zen that relied on koans, which the Buddha never taught. And so they would ask, during the inhalation, they would ask the rhetorical question, who was reciting the Buddha's name? And during the exhalation, they would rapidly whisper, Namo Amitofu. The problem with koan work is it's about striving, which is the opposite of meditation, which is about releasing. So that is as effective as any other form of koan work. That is as effective as any other form of invocation work. But the Buddha was about vulnerability and release. That's the Buddha's path. It has been my experience that the better we get at the vulnerability and release of mindfulness and meditation, the more effortlessly we will experience kindness. Kind intentions that wish others well, kind words that are soothing, kind behavior that is nonviolent, kind commerce that has forsaken cruelty and competition for kindness and cooperation. Those things flow effortlessly for one who has a healthy practice of mindfulness and meditation. So I've experimented with that. I own many books from the Pure Land sect. I've returned to it because I just love the simplicity of it. But I've never stayed with it because it exacted a terrible toll. The toll of reaching, the toll of concentration, which is antithetical to mindfulness and to meditation. I've experimented with all sorts of spiritual practices. I stick with those that work the best for myself and those who rely upon me. Thank you, Jared, for such a lovely, lovely question. So, let's venture forth. I'm tapping button 9 ruthlessly. All lucid minds could be as impermanent and interdependent. What is a lucid mind? A lucid mind is one that perceives sights, sounds, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like. That perceives emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. In other words, a mind. All lucid minds could be as impermanent and interdependent, as if they could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into our vast empty void. Like the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn, which, although tantalizing to the eye, could be not graspable to the hand. Let us count now upon our left index finger. By the way, Jared, before I misread your name as Jay, and I apologize. I recognize you're two separate individuals, and I meant no disrespect. Having played with these 4 easy, gentle, passive contemplations, we come to the main sprint, which in this case is more of a marathon. Let us bring whatever we spontaneously notice into the path of awareness and letting go that we explore during our opening lesson. Well, I'm glad you had a good time with your spiritual practice last night, Jared. Let us bring the central channel yoga into the path of bliss and letting go. During our inhalation, we can silently and mentally recite heart. During our exhalation, we can chant the syllable hum. Remember, the key is to physically relax as best you can while chanting the syllable hum. We are going to replace the word heart with the verb ease. One moment, I think this could be fun. Please bear with me. Okay, here we go. Let us invite real or imagine Lama Kuntu Zangpo to blend with our heart mind, that in the union of bliss and letting go we may train. Let us invite real or imagine Lama Kuntu Zangpo to blend with our heart mind, that in the union of bliss and letting go we may train. Let us invite real or imagine Lama Kuntu Zangpo to blend with our heart mind, that in the union of bliss and letting go we may train. Lama Surya Das refers to this as hunging out. Let us bring the four bases of mindfulness into the practice of love and letting go. May whole minds of all beings know me as peacefully enlightened, as the mind of a real or imagined Buddha symbolized by a Jigme, one suitable seed or bija mantra. May all relationships or speech of all beings know be as joyfully loving as a real or imagined Buddha's communication symbolized by the 12 syllable mantra. May all bodies or forms of all beings know enjoy the beautiful Helsing and Buddha statuary, depicting the blissful body of a real or imagined Devi or Yatama, archetype of enlightenment such as Kuntu Zongpo. May all circumstances or thoughts of all beings know have the good fortune or boon, as a Buddha's real or imagined paradise, pure land or Vati. All visible circumstances or thoughts could be as impermanent and interdependent, as if they could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into this body or form. All sensual bodies or forms could be as impermanent and interdependent, as if they could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into this communication or speech. All resounding interpersonal speech could be as impermanent and interdependent, as if it could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into this mind. All lucid minds could be as impermanent and interdependent as if they could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into our vast empty void. Like the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn, which, although tantalizing to the eye, could be not graspable to the hand. While silently and mentally reciting the demonstrative pronoun this during the inhalation, we could watch the antics of mind as it perceives, emotes, intends, reasons, recalls, and imagines. As we silently and mentally recite the one-syllable verb ease during our exhalation, we could relax into mind's non-graspable nature. Let us invite Lama's teachings to blend with our heart mind, that in the union of bliss and letting go we may train. Let us seal this evening's practice by percussively chanting, loving letting go's wishes for universal enlightenment and well-being. May all minds of all beings lucid yet void no be as enlightened as a Buddha's mind symbolized by a one-syllable bijam. May all speech of all beings resounding yet void now be as loving as a Buddha's speech symbolized by a multi-syllable mantra. May all forms of all beings sensual yet void now be as healthy as a Yada mark type depicted in Buddhist statuary. May all lots of all beings appearing yet void now be as fortunate as a pure land of law depicted in Buddhist paintings. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 10 2/3 hours, I would very much like to return to the tomorrow's early meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the force be with you always.